first and foremost, healing-centered education. Everything I do is for the purpose of healing. So my work with ADC, my own education, my own travels, my mentoring with the students, and all of that, it all goes back to healing because we're all in pain. Frederick Douglass, one of his famous quotes says that it's better to build children than to repair men. Um, and I always extend and say men and women, or adults, if you will. But we have to realize that our babies are already hurting. The doll test that was done back in the mid 1900s, it was so disheartening to see that children, babies, preschool children, when simply asked to point to a doll, and they had several dolls laid out from uh, white skin to dark chocolate skin and all the different shades of skin tones, and asked the children to point to the child who was bad, point to the child who was good. And consistently, no matter what their skin tone was for themselves, they always pointed to the darkest dolls for anything that was negative, and the lightest dolls for anything that was positive. Even when, a black child was sitting there pointing to a black doll saying, that must be the bad one. It's just, so we already know this. This was done back then. This research has been done over and over again with the same results. And so, we can clearly see just from not only the way that teachers are treating the students in school sometimes, but from the police, from society in general, from the images we see on TV to the dolls and toys and children's books that have these very negative narratives. Um, our babies are hurting. So the earlier we start, the better. We have to make sure that we ourselves continue to heal, because I know I didn't grow up with the things that are in place now. I was fortunate to have parents who were very positive and live in a community that did not put me down in those ways. However, we still turn on the TV and see it. We read books and see it. I remember reading tons of different books as a child. All of my children's stories, from fables and tales of Disney characters and Dr. Seuss and all of that. And many of the characters were white or animals. They were rarely children of color. And so my own bookshelf right now has tons and tons of books filled with colorful skin tones. Um, and I look to change that as well. So not only am I a doctoral student working on my dissertation and research, it's interdisciplinary, but very much focused on people of African descent. I'm still a teacher. I still teach across the board from ages 4 to 64, all ages. And I can definitely tell you that the adults are still healing, are still unlearning the negative in order to embrace the positives, and still filled with questions.
All right, thank you so much, Rhonesha. I really appreciate the time and the valuable information that you're sharing with us regarding education and the project that you guys are carrying out within the educational sector. And I find it to be really fascinating, find it to be very important. You see, in Africa, it is believed that a human being is a human being because of other human beings. This, of course, is a line, is completely in line with what we are talking about, which is about connection. Because if you pick out an individual to start alone, it is difficult that this individual can be identified as a human being, because upon whom are you going to be identified? So it is very important that as a people, as a community, we need to connect together, we need to work together. Then looking at the African community, looking at the diaspora community in this case. So I really want to appreciate the work that you guys are doing within the context of the problem that we have. Because you concluded with the fact that we are hurting. It is true. We are hurting not only in the United States or in Europe, but also in Africa. Because the thing that you are referring to, who might call miseducation of the people, because it is a deliberate effort that these images were created and sold into the mind of the African people. It's not a mistake. In fact, as you were talking, I wanted to ask you a question which have to do with how did these images manage to get into the mind of the people?
Well, Media, it's the same thing. Just like you said, it's not just in the U.S. It's a global effort. First of all, as you look through society and see how people of African descent, people with melanated skin, richly melanated skin, I should say, how we're treated, how we're treated on a day-to-day basis, how we're treated over time, the types of jobs that we're allowed to have, the different uh, TV shows, and like who's in politics, who are the leaders. Um, Anything that's put out there usually has something negative when it comes to people of African descent. It's been out there for for centuries. This is nothing new for any of us. This is just a continuous cycle. Change the dates, change maybe the terminology being used, but it's the same exact pattern. It has not stopped for centuries, 400 or 500 years. We're just going through the same thing. It's like this endless cycle of this effort for white people to feel themselves to be supreme. They call it white supremacy, which is truly the most extreme form of having an inferiority complex. So extreme that they call it a superiority complex because they believe that they're superior, that they're better. So there's this obsession with this need for hierarchy. So there's a caste system throughout the world. India is known for a caste, but it's the same thing. There are people in society who um, we're taught from day one, what our place is. Who is the person that you look to when you go to the bank? Who's the person? Who's the president? Who are the leaders? Who are the people on TV speaking and owning things? Um, you can look at people's clothing, their homes, their material possessions, and how those things are valued or not valued. Um, all of that. It's the same narrative. Nothing's different. Nothing's changed. Not much, at least. From the eyes of a person who's read history books, who's traveled and seen the museums throughout the world that show the same things. I must admit, I dropped tears just instantly within seconds of standing in front of the walls at the entrance of the Henry Peterkin Museum in Soweto in South Africa. Because when I walked in, the wall has a huge picture of the children in the 1970s when they were protesting against having poor education. And they were simply saying, we want a better education. And one of them had a sign that said, don't shoot. And all of them had their hands up. And this was hmm, just a few years ago. And of course, we've had many situations in the US where the chant was hands up, don't shoot. So it's like there's this repetition, this is the same thing. Apartheid versus segregation, Jim Crow laws, same thing, same exact pattern. So when we ask where did it come from and how was it perpetuated, in every way possible, literally. And the fact that the types of foods that we get and the stories that we're told by them, the way that we're treated, disrespected, truly disrespected. The people who are in prison the most, there are more Black people in prison today in the US than there were enslaved. And it's ridiculous. I mean, just any and everything they can do. So even recently I called this travel company, um or actually they had called me trying to sell me a tour, a package travel deal to go to South Africa. And the guy, who was apparently white, said, yeah, well, the the local people here, um, as if he didn't consider himself to be local. They do some fancy foot stomping, and they're always smiling and ready to entertain you. And I was like, good God, this man has no idea who I am. Apparently, I'm not impressed by this. I was like, that is the most offensive thing. Fancy foot stomping. Those dances have names. You know what I'm saying? I mean, just he was so degrading. And I've had conversations with senior scholars, quote unquote scholars, right? Of white descent, oh well, Europeans who tried their best to just tear me down. Uh, they read a poem that I had written with another colleague and just wanted to tear it down and wanted to debate. But in his form of debate, somebody has to win, somebody has to lose. And I'm like, why can't we just have a conversation?